Is it water with the sheep in the box?
Possibly the oldest and most enduring supernatural belief, the one that is most widespread and all-encompassing, other than, I guess, religion or gods, though this is arguable, is that of the ghost. The idea that a person lingers after death, hanging around the human world and haunting others, is an enormous part of almost every culture and religion throughout history and across the world. You might compare it to the concept of an afterlife in general, I suppose. There's almost certainly a lot of interesting philosophy and conjecture you could bring up with regards to this, of course. After all, most people you meet who are super into ghosts are often those who have lost loved ones. My grandmother, for example, was, like most people in the UK, a pretty agnostic Christian, in that while she did believe that there is a heaven, she didn't really go to church or have any strong opinions about religion in general, but she did believe in an afterlife. This naturally included ghosts, and many times she believed she was being visited by the spirit of her son, the uncle I never really met, or if I did I was too young to remember, who died several years prior. You know, the usual kind of stuff, like she'd come downstairs and a lamp would have turned on by itself, that sort of thing. And it brought her a lot of comfort to think that her son was not gone, but that he was visiting her or looking after her from the next life. And I think that's important to acknowledge here before we start tearing ghost hunters a new one. A lot of people who believe in ghosts do so due to grief or loss and a need to believe that death is not the end, and this is the reason why I, like my grandmother, am not particularly religious or spiritual, but choose to believe, or perhaps merely live in hope, that there is an afterlife of some description. My grandmother was my best friend during some of the hardest times in my life, and her loss devastated me. For me, it is unthinkable that she is just gone forever, so the idea of an afterlife where she gets to live forever with all the dogs she had in life is a great comfort to me, though she often used to say that she was ambivalent about it, including on one occasion telling me, if there's nothing after this, I won't know, so I won't mind. In short, this is why many people turn to religion after a loss. The idea that a person you care deeply about is just gone forever is much more painful than the initial loss itself. In fact, during the writing of this video, my grandfather, with whom I was very close, passed away, and that loss has been devastating for my family. It really made me wish I could bring myself to believe in a religion so I could tell myself that I'll see him again someday, because the alternative is intolerable. I will never ever judge or mock people for seeking comfort in the supernatural after a loss or bereavement. I don't personally believe in ghosts, but if you do, then fine. The biggest problem I have with ghost media is actually not ghost hunters, though they are often extremely problematic and objectively fucked up, or people talking generally about ghosts but with mediums. By the time this video is uploaded, I've probably already released a whole separate video about these charlatans, but before we get into talking about ghost hunting, I want to make it clear that whilst running around in the dark with gadgets and talking to ghosts is all in good fun, and believing in ghosts in general is a perfectly fine and harmless thing to do, the people who prey on vulnerable people in order to make money, lie, and pretend to be channeling the spirits of loved ones who have passed are scum, and I will not hold back in my criticisms of them. I do not believe in ghosts, but I will stand in solidarity with those who do, against the people trying to take advantage of the vulnerable. These people should not be taken seriously in any way, shape, or form. Alright, rant aside, let's talk about ghost hunting. I'll be discussing the so-called evidence of ghosts in this video at length, but I wanted to get the point across that psychics and mediums are bullshit out there straight away, because frankly, a guy who reckons he has magical powers and therefore you can trust him, I swear, is probably the least convincing quote-unquote evidence you could possibly get. But psychics are their own thing, despite having some overlap with ghost hunters, and I've already spoken about them at length. I'm going to move on, assuming that you've already seen the video made about psychics a while back, but it's not necessary viewing. You're probably most aware of ghost hunters from the various TV shows that follow them, and they are certainly the way that the hobby gained mainstream recognition, but Ghost Adventures and Most Haunted are not where the story began or ended. Indeed, most ghost hunters hunters are not even professionals, but amateurs with perhaps a bit too much spare time and disposable income. So what is a ghost hunter? Well, in short, it's a person who hunts ghosts. Or to be a little less obnoxious, it's a person or group of people who go into supposedly haunted locations looking for proof of ghosts and the paranormal, using an array of what I would refer to as rather questionable methods and instruments, and they've been something of a fascination of mine for quite some time now. As you may or may not have realised by now, after I released a 2-hour-long video about cryptids, stuff like this really captivates me, though I don't personally believe. However, before we talk about the wacky characters who go out looking for ghosts, let's discuss what it is that they're hunting. When talking to believers, or even just people who are vaguely aware of so-called ghost lore, it quickly becomes clear that there are a few theories about what a ghost might be or why they continue to persist that crop up again and again, both inside and out of paranormal circles. In all though, there are, by and large, 2 or 3 main umbrella theories, each with several connected sub-theories within them. First, there's the idea of unfinished business, or the belief that a person who died persisted in the land of the living because they had a purpose on Earth, and their drive to complete it was so great. This also crosses over with the often similar idea of the ghost who is unable to rest due to circumstances of their death being either traumatic or unsolved. This is a trope you've probably seen in ghost media before, in that the spirit of the departed person is only able to move on once justice for their death has been served. The idea is that the spirit of the departed person was so enraged and or unwilling to let go of their earthly concerns that they quite literally could not move on until those issues that concern them so much were resolved. This is often the job of an exorcist, to discover this purpose and to either finish the unfinished business or help to persuade the spirit to come to terms with reality and move on regardless. Like post-mortem therapy, I suppose, which is nice. Examples of this could be said to be the Indian burial ground trope, where white guilt over the genocide of the Native American people translates into folk tales about the vengeful spirits of those people returning to terrorize the ancestors of their murderers, and of course, the classic murder mystery trope of the ghost being unable to rest until its murder is solved. Interestingly though, it could actually be argued that the origin of this particular angle of the theory comes from the Catholic belief in the fate of the unconverted, wherein those who died without being baptized were cursed to walk the earth forever, unable to enter heaven, and indeed Catholicism has its place in a lot of ghost stories, as we'll later discuss. The second theory is quite a simple one, that heightened emotion, though usually negative emotion, leaves a residual trace of itself in the area where it occurred, kind of like that one episode of Torchwood. There is no evidence for this, and it's more of a post hoc explanation, but this one is one of the most common reasons given for the more old-fashioned kind of ghost, that of the sad figure wandering an old mansion endlessly, walking through walls where doors used to be, not interacting with the living, and so on. Basically, this theory posits that this kind of ghost is not a disembodied spirit or sentient being at all, but merely a side effect of heightened emotional energy, a thing that very much does not exist, but let's be honest, neither do ghosts, so I'm not sure what purpose is to be gained in belabouring this point. An offshoot of this theory is the horrifying connected theory that these figures are sentient spirits, but they're either trapped repeating the same routine they had in life forevermore, or else are simply unaware that they're dead and are either living their life as normal, or else are living in an alternate dimension or spiritual plane, if you like, that actually crosses over with ours, and to them, we may appear to be the ghosts. And finally, of course, there is the theory that these are cursed spirits trapped in Purgatory, a realm closer to us than either heaven or hell, that may in fact run parallel to our dimension. This is pretty much the exact same as the above spirit realm theory, but with a couple of minor Christian-based tweaks. Obviously, all this comes with a rather large asterisk and acknowledgement of the following caveat. This is what we in the West and in the modern day recognise and understand about ghosts. As previously mentioned, other cultures and peoples throughout history century have had radically different and varied views about what causes the spirits of the dead to return to life, but when we discuss modern ghost hunters, we're primarily talking about those existing in the West in the modern day, and primarily within the Anglosphere, and that is the focus of this video, what I'm most able to understand, research and relate to you, my primarily Western audience. And let's be honest, Western cultural hegemony means that even if you are in the minority of my audience who is not in the West watching this, you have at least a passing familiarity with the concepts mentioned here. This is what I'm comfortable talking authoritatively about, and I don't know if I really want to stretch this video out by talking extensively about the differences between ghost hunting cultures throughout the world, fascinating though that may be. Maybe that could be its own video one day, but I'd need to speak to someone a lot more well versed in this area than myself. One of the most important factors to consider when discussing ghosts and the paranormal is, well, where is the line? Is what you're looking at really a ghost, or is it a demon? What's even the difference? Well, in the simplest possible terms, a while ago, the Catholic Church, which is where a lot of ghost and demon lore originates, decreed that whilst they did believe in and were willing to accept certain aspects of the paranormal, it was going to be on their terms. After all, if some people just kinda stuck around after death in the real world, well, what did that say about their very specific beliefs regarding the afterlife? Hence Purgatory, of course. The simple answer to the question of what happens to people who are neither good nor evil after death, and also a handy explanation for ghosts and spirits, and also nicely allows for believers in other faiths to be subsumed into the church without much effort. Ancestor worship still kinda exists, but those aren't gods, they're those stuck in purgatory, and so on. But fairly early on, there was a necessary distinction made between spirits trapped in purgatory, those with unfinished business, aka sins they needed to atone for before moving on, and malevolent beings with power and malintent. A ghost could maybe move things around, sort of communicate, or else just appear visually to those looking, but a demon has significantly more power and often appears very similar to your standard ghost on first standard observation. So what's the difference in specifics? Well, let's break this down into 3 categories of paranormal entity for simplicity's sake, shall we? First, ghosts. A ghost, of course, is essentially just the spirit of a deceased person that has failed to, or chosen not to, move on to the next life, and as such still remains in our world. A poltergeist, a name that literally translates to noisy ghost, is generally like a ghost, but spicier. In some contexts, they're said to be able to violently or aggressively interact with humans, as well as, famously, move, throw, or even break objects. Interestingly though, the word's definition implies that a poltergeist is a subspecies or specific type of ghost. A lot of so-called experts believe they're literally a completely different entity. According to Psychic Elements, a sort of paranormal wiki I found, poltergeists have nothing to do with ghosts or spirits at all. The best way to describe it is active energy that causes physical disturbances. This makes sense, as ghosts are generally unable to break through to the physical realm in the noticeable ways that make poltergeists unique, meaning that a poltergeist is unlikely to be sentient in the same way a ghost might be, or if they are, they lack the ability or power to act on that sentience. Of course, another key difference is that poltergeists aren't typically tangibly visible in the way your standard ghosts often are, instead making their presence known with actions rather than appearing as a spooky apparition. Or, as Mystic Investigations put it, poltergeists are extremely angry or violent non-corporeal entities who have the power to lash out and physically interact with our environment. And then, of course, there's demons, which are defined by the dictionary as an evil spirit or devil, especially one thought to possess a spirit or act as a tormentor in hell. They're widely considered to be insidious and malevolent in nature, and have been referenced in countless types of folklore, religions, and cultures throughout history, though this is debatable, as I just mentioned, often the church has declared various kinds of folklore actually just demons in disguise, like, for example, the Fae, as I mentioned in my King Arthur video. In religious terms, they're often considered to be fallen angels or servants of the devil who wield some kind of supernatural power comparable to angels. A demon isn't out for any resolution of an issue, but rather pure malicious evil, as it feeds off the emotional energy of fear and anger. This sets them apart from ghosts, obviously, and while the danger and potential for physical destruction associated with demons can be compared to that of a poltergeist, it's considered much more severe in demonic cases, and unlike poltergeists, demons have the ability to make themselves very much seen in the human realm. A poltergeist is basically a manifestation of rage and chaos, whereas a demon is actively malevolent. Demons can manifest themselves to us, taking on physical forms in order to try to coax us to commit evil. They're said to be highly persuasive and tempting, and prey upon vulnerable, emotionally troubled people who may be desperate for help, not able to think clearly, or who are considered quote-unquote weak in other ways. Often, they will appear in the form of a small child in order to elicit sympathy, or deceptively appear as a harmless ghost, and indeed, many demons are often originally misinterpreted as ghosts by paranormal investigators, according to some. Additionally, of course, demons have a fairly unique ability: demonic possession, or literally taking over the body of a human host. A demonic possession occurs when, through continued cooperation with a demon, a person essentially invites the demon in by aligning his will with that of the demon. This is where the demon's power of persuasion comes in handy. They essentially have to convince you to allow them in, hence why they target people with emotional or physical weaknesses who may be desperate or just not strong-willed enough to deny the temptations offered up by the demon. Think of it like the AI in a box experiment. A creature or being with almost unlimited intelligence, cunning and persuasive power will inevitably be able to convince you, especially if you are already emotionally or spiritually struggling, to bend to its will one way or another given enough time. And thus was born the study of demonology, which is absolutely fucking wild and honestly could be its own extremely long video, but for now, the short version is that demonology is a paranormal pseudoscience concerned with the study of demons. Generally, it involves things like classification of demonic hierarchical structures, the individual demon's powers and limitations, as well as variations in attributes, names, and derivations. The same but opposite to angels, of course. There are hierarchies in both heaven and hell. If it helps, think about Giles in Buffy as your bog standard demonologist. What he does when he goes through his books and does a huge exposition dump regarding the villain of the week is essentially demonology, or a Hollywoodized version of it. There are an absolute ton of books on demonology that have been written over the centuries, based primarily on, well, very little, to be honest. It's mostly stuff like other people's gods, vague mentions in the Bible and in ancient Jewish scripture, and so on. Arguably, the idea of the devil himself comes from speculative demonology. He is, after all, never really specifically mentioned in the Bible, but scholars surmise that a number of probably disconnected and ultimately fleeting mentions of the adversary or the temptation were potentially all referring to a single, incredibly powerful entity. Honestly, I could talk for hours about this. Demonology is fascinating, and theology, in a way, is really interesting to me as well as a non-believer, but for now, let's leave it at that and just provide a couple of examples to make the point. Belphegor is fucking incredible, to be honest. He got his start in Assyria a few thousand years back, where he was called Baal-Peor and was associated with orgies and other types of sexual immorality and lewdness. The early Israelites worshipped him in the form of a phallic idol, though of course he was later banned under idolatry laws. Later on, in Kabbalic mythology, he was a demon who made people suspicious of each other and who would seduce and manipulate them with money and wealth. Summoning rituals were interesting, to say the least, as Baal-Peor required the sacrifice of human excrement for some reason. I guess he's really big into scat kink or something. In the 16th century, his name was changed to Belphegor, and he was said to have changed his methods. He basically just stopped caring about sowing distrust among people and instead refocused on seduction of humanity through wealth and power, primarily through inventors, as capitalism was in its infancy, and someone who invented something useful or widely used could become rich beyond compare. He would suggest crazy yet plausible inventions to people and then use their greed to his advantage when they became successful. According to legend, Belphegor was sent to Earth from Hell to either justify or disprove the rumours that marriage can result in happiness. Finding no evidence that happiness is possible in a marriage, which goes to show that the straights have never been okay, he chose to stay on Earth and fuck with humanity from time to time. According to some courses, he is primarily notable for two bizarre attributes. He's either believed to be physically, mentally, and strategically strongest in the month of April, and he either was or is Satan's ambassador to France. Belphegor also played a role in Milton's book Paradise Lost, where he is either depicted as a hideous bearded demon with horns and claws, or a beautiful young woman, though honestly, why not both? Belphegor the trans icon. You heard it here first. Agarez is something fucking else. He is said to make those who run stand still, which he often couples with his role as one of the demons that controls earthquakes and other natural disasters. In essence, you know the fight, flight or freeze response? Agarez causes the freeze, basically. Agarez also, apparently, teaches languages to those who follow him, focusing mainly on the profanities and ethnic slurs, so presumably he's also gained a huge following on Twitch. He's believed to be the ruler of the eastern zone of hell and is said to have 31 legions of demons at his command. What I love about him though is his appearance, which is fucking incredible. More often than not, he's portrayed as a pale elderly man riding a crocodile with a hawk either attached to or on his fist. Metal as fuck if you ask me. Alright, so let's say you don't necessarily agree with the common supernatural narrative regarding ghosts as spirits of those long since passed into the next life. What could possibly explain the phenomena that often get reported? If these things are not ghosts, then, well, what are they? Time to be a party pooper, I guess. In my opinion, there are three main rational explanations, which I will now explain. First, there's sleep paralysis. Now, for those unaware, sleep paralysis is basically a state you can enter where you're both dreaming and awake and also unable to move because your body believes that you're still asleep even though your mind is semi-aware. You actually remain aware during episodes of sleep paralysis but may experience nightmarish hallucinations and a sensation of suffocation. Indeed, the idea of a sleep paralysis demon is a whole meme now, but basically it originates from the shared experience of sleep paralysis sufferers commonly feeling a sense that they're being watched and or hallucinating monsters and stuff, except that whilst this would be perfectly normal within a dream, the blending of dreams and reality during sleep paralysis can make it seem all too real. It's for this reason that I immediately dismiss 99% of ghost stories or reports of supernatural phenomena when they involve someone either in bed or asleep, because most of the time it's someone not realizing they've entered a state of sleep paralysis and are hallucinating rather than actually witnessing a haunting. After all, these episodes of sleep paralysis usually involve elements of both sleep and wakefulness, which is a part of why they can give rise to distressing symptoms. Another connected but distinct theory as to what causes people to see ghosts is carbon monoxide poisoning. Basically, a lot of household items emit low levels of the poisonous gas carbon monoxide when they start malfunctioning. It's often undetectable, and in high enough levels or on a long enough timescale, it can cause symptoms very similar to that of ghost sightings, including but not limited to headaches, dizziness, confusion, giddiness, nausea, and, of course, hallucinations. Indeed, a lot of people in the scientific community do tend to believe that a significant amount of so-called ghost sightings can be put down to incidents of domestic carbon monoxide leaking, and there have actually been studies proving that installing a carbon monoxide detector can reduce sightings of ghosts, so that's pretty cut and dry, right? And finally, the most obvious and, to be honest, kind of anticlimactic explanation in my opinion, confirmation bias and plain old human pattern recognition. To put it extremely simply, if you believe in ghosts and are actively looking to find them, you are more likely to interpret shaky so-called evidence as definitive proof, and likewise, we as humans have senses designed to detect patterns even where there are none, which contributes to this as well. There's a reason ghosts mostly appear in the dark, and mostly to people who already believe in ghosts. Things you see in the dark can confuse your brain and the pattern recognition part of it significantly, and if you already believe in ghosts, well, there's your answer. The same also applies to things like cryptids and UFOs, obviously. A light in the sky is unlikely to be interpreted as a UFO by someone who doesn't already believe in UFOs. Ghosts are not a new idea. Yeah, no shit. However, I find it interesting that we've clung to the idea of them for so long, even in the face of religions and cultural movements that may render them obsolete or taboo to even think about. Perhaps it has something to do with our fear of and fascination with death, or maybe it's a natural response to grief and loss. Regardless, it's impossible and ultimately pointless to deny that this idea is as prevalent and widespread as it is, not to mention ancient. Most cultures throughout history have had some kind of ancestor spirit myth or some version of a spirit of a human remaining and hanging around the world of the living, either because they failed to move on to the afterlife or else in some other way chose to or became trapped here with us. Allow me to provide some examples. Let's start 5,000 years ago. In Mesopotamian society, ghost stories were actually quite a large part of the culture. According to Mesopotamians, when a person's physical body died, it created what was known as a gidim, an imprint or image of the person at the time of their death, which retained their memories and personality in ghost form, much like today's conception of a ghost. In the mythology of the afterlife, people believed the souls of the dead would travel to the underworld, or Arkala, in an inescapable place where spirits would dwell for eternity. In some cases, it was even thought that spirits, or gidim, could escape and infiltrate the mortal world in much the same way as Greek mythology is filled with stories of people escaping the underworld. However, unlike Greek mythology, these escaped ghosts would not be able to resume life as before, but exist as a ghost. According to some, gidim who dwelled in the mortal realm did so because they had not received a proper burial. They assumed these spirits could not find peace, so instead they would haunt family and friends until or unless put to rest properly. When the people of ancient Mesopotamia experienced illnesses and misfortune, they often believed it was caused by hauntings or gidim. Mesopotamians regularly made offerings to the dead to placate them if they thought that a gidim was responsible. A famous example of one such spirit from ancient literature is found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, wherein Gilgamesh summons Enkidu back from the dead, inviting him into the mortal world in ghost form. Ancient Greeks divided ghosts and spectres into three subcategories: the Ataphoi, the Auroi, and the Biaithanatoi. The Ataphoi were believed to be the spirits of people whose bodies had not received a proper burial. A prime example of an Ataphos from ancient Greek literature is Elpenor from Homer's Odyssey. In the epic stories of Elpenor, a companion of Odysseus fell off a roof while intoxicated and his body was left without a burial. When Odysseus later visited the underworld, Elpenor's shade appeared and begged the hero for burial. The Auroi, the second kind of ghost, were deemed to be spirits of those who had died too young or before their time. These spirits were left unfulfilled by life and could easily become vengeful after death, seeking revenge upon the living, a kind of poltergeist. Lastly, the Blathanatos was the spirit of a person who had suffered a violent death, including those who died in battle and war. Much like the Ataphoi, ancient Greeks believed that a Blathanatos was a fallen warrior who could become active if they were not properly buried, as was befitting of a warrior who died honourably in battle. Indeed, the majority of ghost stories from Greek literature find their origin in improper burial, suggesting burial rites were essential elements of ancient Greek religion. The Romans believed in ghosts, much like the Greeks, and indeed didn't have just one idea about ghosts. Some were lemurs, no, not like that, angry or overlooked spirits who could cause trouble for the living. They were honoured annually with a series of feast days in May. Not surprisingly, lemurs mostly appeared in literature since they tend to make good ghost stories. Other ghosts were members of the natural and ever-increasing number of dead ancestors and close relatives who functioned as guiding and protective forces in Roman daily life. These spirits, the manes, were imagined as being in or under the earth and were celebrated with a 9-day festival, the Parentalia, in February, and were often described as gods. This may seem odd, but historians argue that the distinction between gods and protective spirits wasn't one which the Romans would have cared too much about. One of the few examples of ghostly encounters from ancient Rome is found in the literature of Apuleius. In his Metamorphoses, an unpleasant apparition was summoned by a jilted wife who intended for the ghost to kill her husband. The spectre appeared each day at midday until the deed was done. One day, a mysterious woman was sighted luring a man into a room. When the husband's servants searched for him, they broke down the door to find the man dead. The mysterious woman was nowhere to be found and was believed to have been the midday apparition. Although this is more akin to what we would nowadays consider more of a demon summoning than a ghostly encounter, it is generally considered to be a form of ghost sighting. One of the most popular ghost stories from ancient Roman Latin literature Detector is found in a letter written by Pliny the Younger and dated to the 1st century CE. According to Pliny, there was a mysterious house located in Athens which was supposedly haunted, and strange stories could be heard at night, wherein the sound of rattling chains could be heard throughout the house. At first they sounded far off, but gradually came closer. Finally, a spectre would appear in the form of a bearded, emaciated old man with long hair. This haunting vision was described as being chained at both his arms and legs. Unable to bear the haunting, the residents soon left, and the house was left abandoned. It is thought that the Greek philosopher Athenodorus found that the house was for sale, and upon further investigation learned the stories associated with the building. Athenodorus bought the house and moved in soon after. One night, when the philosopher was seated on a couch in the front of the house, he found the sound of rattling chains. However, he ignored this and continued focusing on his writing. Slowly, the sound came closer. When the sound reached Athenodorus' room, the philosopher looked up and saw the spectre. The ghost looked at Athenodorus and waved a finger at him. However, in his stoic style, Athenodorus told the ghost to wait and returned to his writing. The old man became insistent, and finally, Athenodorus got up from his seat and followed the ghost. The spectre led the philosopher to the backyard and disappeared. Athenodorus then marked the area where the ghost had vanished. The following day, Athenodorus implored the local authorities to investigate the area. The skeleton of a man bound in chains was discovered in the spot he had marked. The skeleton was given a proper burial, and the house in Athens never experienced a haunting again. In the earlier period of Egypt, the soul was considered a single entity known as the khu, the moral aspect of an individual, but in later times this was changed and the soul became more commonly considered to be made up of 5 different components. 2 of these components, the ba and ka, spirit and personality, came together after death in the form of the ak, and this was the entity that would return as a ghost. If proper rites had not been observed in the burial, or some sin had been committed by the living either before or after the person's death, the ak was given dispensation by the gods to return to earth to redress the wrong. The living who were harassed by the ghost would then have to plead their case directly to the returned spirits in hopes of a reasonable response, and, if that was ineffective, would need to have a priest intervene and judge between the living and the dead. An example of this would be the way that, when misfortune fell upon a widower, it was often attributed to some sin he had hidden from his wife that she, now an all-knowing spirit in the field of reeds, the Egyptian afterlife, was punishing him for. In a letter from a widower to his dead wife found in a tomb from the New Kingdom, the man pleads with the spirit of his wife to leave him alone, as he is innocent of any wrongdoing. What wicked thing have I done to thee, that I should have come to this evil pass? What have I done to thee? But what thou hast done to me is to have laid hands on me, although I had nothing wicked to thee, and from time I lived with thee as thy husband down to today. What have I done to thee that I need hide? When thou didst sicken of the illness which you hadst, I caused a master physician to be fetched. I spent 8 months without eating or drinking like a man. I wept exceedingly together with my household in front of my street quarter. I gave linen clothes to wrap thee, and left no benefit undone that had to be performed for thee. And now, behold, I have spent 3 years alone without entering into a house, though it is not right that one like me should have to do it. This have I done for thy sake, but behold, thou dost not know good from bad. If properly buried with adequate rites and continually remembered, the spirits of the dead could be of great benefit to the living and watch over them throughout their lives. There was a significant difference, however, in Egyptian understanding of a spirit who resided peacefully in the field of reeds and a ghost who returned to earth. For one thing, the ghost that returned to the mortal realm was at best 2/5 of a person who died, and the rest moved on to the afterlife.
Oh shit! A ghost!
Before we fully move on, it's probably worth taking a brief aside to point out that whilst a ghost is, in our modern conception anyway, the spirit of a dead person, the function of a ghost is often a blanket explanation for unexplained phenomena, or, not to put too fine a point on it, things that go bump in the night. Minor things that believers nowadays might attribute to ghosts, things moving seemingly on their own, losing objects, noises in the night, etc., haven't always been associated with the disembodied souls of the dead across cultures. Sometimes spirits of the dead were not believed to linger, and sometimes they were, but they served a different purpose, and the things that went bump in the night, created mischief and messed with the mortal world were supernatural, yes, but inhuman. Examples of this might be the dobbies and brownies of ancient Celtic folklore, or various other fey creatures which were said to enter the homes of mortals and do various things, from useful things like helping with housework to more sinister things like theft or even kidnapping children. Likewise, a lot of African folklore talks of goblins or other similar creatures such as the tokolosh, which serve a similar function. Or there's the jinn of Arabic mythology, which are their own thing really, but are more often than not invisible creatures that fuck with humans from time to time. The list goes on, you get the point. Of course, as we discussed earlier in this video, there is a more recent, comparatively speaking, association with angels, or more importantly, demons, especially in the West, where in the distant past, as I covered in my video about King Arthur, the church sought to assimilate the local pagan beliefs in the Fae into Christian mythology, so often the demons of the Bible started to fulfill a similar function to the Fae, though that's not the only reason, of course. Brownies, dobbies, kobolds, and so on stopped being complex and fleshed out pieces of a cohesive indigenous mythology and became evil demons, and then later on became part of a different complex mythology as demonology became more popular, as we previously discussed. Fascinating how this works, eh?
5 little ghosts went out one night, haunting, spooking, what a fright. Mother ghost said boo, boo, and back to the house all the 5 ghosts flew.
There is a fair bit of debate to be had about what counts as ghost hunting, to be honest. For example, does a bunch of teenagers hanging out in a haunted house and daring one another to stay as long as possible count quite as much as the so-called professional ghost hunters you see on TV? What about the hunt for Spring-Heeled Jack, an apparition known to cause mischief in the streets of Victorian England, and which eventually led to Sir Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington and victor of the Battle of Waterloo, to chase him down? Such was the seriousness with which many of these cases were treated. Was the Duke of Wellington a ghost hunter? Or how about the case of the Hammersmith ghost, in which a prankster decided to actively start going about terrorising locals whilst dressed in a white sheet and claiming to be the spirit of a recently deceased local man, causing such a state of panic and paranoia that it caused a policeman who was investigating to shoot dead an innocent bricklayer wearing a traditional white overall because he believed him to be the ghost. Was that policeman a ghost hunter? All of these examples technically involve ghosts and the investigation and hunting thereof, but I think we can safely agree that this is not necessarily what we mean when we talk about ghost hunting. Let's talk about some of the history of the modern ghost hunting movement. Probably the first organisation that comes to mind when one thinks about ghost hunters and paranormal investigators, other than the Catholic Church, is the Society for Psychical Research, whose stated purpose is to understand events and abilities commonly described as psychic or paranormal. It describes itself as the first society to conduct organised scholarly research into human experiences that challenge contemporary scientific models. Formed in 1881, the SPR was the first organisation of its kind in the world, its stated purpose being to approach these varied problems without prejudice or prepossession of any kind, and in the same spirit of exact and unimpassioned inquiry which has enabled science to solve so many problems, once not less obscure nor less hotly debated. The SPR is the most prominent of these, but by no means unique. Most of the research and academic or pseudo-academic study into the paranormal is based primarily on the spiritualist movement and old school Catholicism. Speaking of which, spiritualism is a difficult thing to describe. Is it a religion, an ideology, a system of beliefs? I suppose it's technically all of the above and also none of them. Let's try though, because frustratingly the spiritualist movement is integral to understanding the history of modern supernatural beliefs. This section is mostly based upon an interesting article I found covering the subject, which can be found in the description below. So, in short, spiritualism is a movement based on the belief that the spirits of the dead exist and have the ability and the necessary means to communicate with the living. The afterlife, or the so-called spirit world, is seen by spiritualists not as a static place but as a parallel one, in which spirits continue to exist and evolve beyond human confinements. These two beliefs, that contact with spirits is possible and that spirits are more advanced than humans, led spiritualists to a third belief, that spirits are capable of providing useful information and knowledge about moral and ethical issues, as well as about the nature of God, which they also believe in somehow. Some spiritualists will speak of a concept which they refer to as spirit guides, specific spirits often contacted who are relied upon for spiritual guidance. Most famously, for any of my British viewers, Derek Okora claims to be guided by a spirit named Sam to bridge the gap in communication between him and the ghosts at the places he visits on TV.
Regular viewers will be familiar with Derek's spirit guide Sam, a constant fixture in his life as a medium and an old friend.
I've named him Sam. His true name is Masumai, and he's an Ethiopian black man. And in my previous life, that's where I knew Sam from, in my previous life. And I was a little black boy, an Ethiopian from a family in Ethiopia. And something that I've only found out in the last 4 years, which rocked me, and I've not told anyone this yet, so this is the first, okay, is that, I just couldn't believe it. Sam, we just finished a show in Cardiff, and he said, I'm coming back. He said, into a lifetime. He said, and I'm only coming back when you're due to come over here, and you're going to do exactly the same for me as I've done for you in this lifetime.
Spiritualism developed and reached its peak growth in membership from the 1840s to the 1920s, and by 1897 spiritualism was said to have more than 8 million followers in the US and Europe, mostly drawn from the middle and upper classes. Spiritualists often set March 31st, 1848 as the beginning of their movement. On that date, Kate and Margaret Fox of Hydesville, New York, reported that they had made contact with a spirit that was later claimed to be the spirit of a murdered peddler whose body was found in the house, though no record of such a person was ever found. The spirit was said to have communicated through rapping noises,
everything rings and I can see my breath up right now, I'm breathing, but I got no pulse, I just wanted to leave, but my heart ain't beating, I better get back to the black hole sun, if my gun, I don't need a phone, it's fun, I'm putting this up and I'm thinking I'm running my home, trying to keep my wrist closed.
No, not like that. Audible to onlookers and, famously, easy to fake. This so-called evidence of the senses appealed to the gullible, and the Fox sisters became a sensation. As the first celebrity mediums, the sisters quickly became famous for their public seances in New York. However, in 1888, the Fox sisters admitted that this contact with the spirit was a hoax, because of course it was, because ghosts aren't real. In the years following the sensation of the Fox sisters, demonstrations of mediumship, seances and automatic writing, the practice of channeling a spirit to write through you by possessing your hand, for example, proved to be a profitable venture and soon became popular forms of entertainment. The Fox sisters were able to earn a very comfortable living this way, and others would follow their lead. Showmanship became an increasingly important part of spiritualism, and the visible, audible and tangible evidence of spirits escalated as mediums competed for paying audiences. As independent investigating commissions repeatedly established, most notably the 1887 report of the Siebert Commission, fraud was widespread and some of these cases were prosecuted in the courts. Slowly, over time, the tricks employed by mediums began to appear very similar to those used by stage magicians and what would nowadays be called illusionists. In my opinion, this is still the case. Despite numerous instances of obvious charlatanism, the appeal of spiritualism was strong. As one might expect, prominent in the ranks of adherents were those grieving from the deaths of loved ones, a trend that sadly still exists today. Many families during the time of the American Civil War had seen their loved ones go off and never return, and images of the battlefield, produced through the new medium of photography, demonstrated that their loved ones had not only died in overwhelmingly huge numbers, but many of them horribly as well. One well-known case is that of Mary Todd Lincoln, who, grieving the loss of her son, organized seances in the White House which were attended by her husband, President Abraham Lincoln. The surge of spiritualism during this time, and later during World War I, was a direct response to those massive battlefield casualties. The claims of spiritualists and others as to the reality of spirits were investigated by the Society for Psychical Research, founded in London in 1882, whereupon the society set up a committee on haunted houses, as we've just mentioned. Magicians and writers on magic have a long history of exposing the fraudulent methods of mediumship due to, as mentioned, the overlap in methods. During the 1920s, magician Harry Houdini undertook a well-publicised campaign to expose fraudulent mediums. mediums, who's adamant that, up to the present time, anything that I've investigated has been the result of deluded brains. He was especially incensed when one medium claimed to have spoken to the spirit of his dead mother in English, a language she never spoke, and after his death, another medium claimed to have contacted him, but was rather publicly embarrassed when Houdini's widow revealed that the two of them had agreed that if one of them died, the other would try to contact them from beyond the grave, and they'd come up with a password in order to prove that it was really them. The medium was unable to relay the password. Of course, we've mentioned James Randi, a former magician and debunker of psychics, in a previous video, so this is an age-old tradition, it seems. Spiritualism was mainly a middle and upper class movement, and especially popular with women. American spiritualists would meet in private homes for seances, at lecture halls for trance lectures, at state or national conventions, and at summer camps attended by thousands. However, at the beginning of the last century, the spiritualism movement began to fade, partly through the publicity of fraud accusations, and partly through the appeal of religious movements such as Christian Science and the Spiritualist Church. That of faith healing and other bullshit was organised in response and is claimed to be the last vestige of the movement left today.
What's going on there? Cancer! Cancer! All the pain is gone. How's the anointing? You are. Pick him up. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa.
As it turns out, dishonest people claiming to have supernatural powers and the ability to claim to contact the dead are able to easily pivot towards faith healing and other similar bullshit with a nice Jesus-y coat of paint. Weird that, eh? Speaking of which,
Pie Jesu Domine, dona eis requiem.
Alright, so when it comes to our modern interpretation of ghost hunting, we have to accept that the majority of it comes primarily from Catholicism in the Middle Ages. That's not to downplay, deny, or ignore the numerous cultures throughout history that have believed in ghosts, spirits, or ancestral apparitions, of course, and indeed history is filled with cultures that believed that those who passed over were able to return to the mortal world from time to time, as we covered earlier. And that's all fine and dandy. Obviously, I'm not going to claim that the Christians invented the concept of ghosts, but when it comes to what we now consider the lore of ghosts and ghost hunting, it comes back to Catholicism in the Middle Ages, just like many of our favourite mythical creatures. There's a reason vampires fear the cross, after all. Starting in the Middle Ages, Catholic belief in ghosts really took off, as the concept of purgatory became a more hotly debated and discussed issue. However, along with this came a sort of polarisation. Ghosts were not necessarily always ghosts, you see, but occasionally they could be demons masquerading as ghosts. To summarise extremely quickly, because I covered this earlier, let's use the example of a French lawyer named Pierre de Loyer, who, during the Reformation, wrote a Catholic take on the subject of ghosts called the 4 Books of Spectres, which define 3 ways in which someone who has encountered a ghost might make sense of what they've seen. First, he claimed they may have simply been mistaken. They thought they saw something, but they didn't. Second, they may have experienced an angel or demon taking human form. Or thirdly, and finally, they may have encountered a purgatorial soul seeking aid. And thus, alongside this renewed interest in ghosts, grew the study of demonology, as we previously covered. Catholic priests were often called upon during this time to perform exorcisms and to help souls pass into the afterlife, or else expel demons from a house or person, a practice that does still technically exist but has fallen out of favour somewhat in recent times. This thread continued throughout much of European history, all the way up to the modern day, and of course the explosion of ghost media in the 19th century. In Dickens' most famous ghost story, for example, A Christmas Carol, the ghost of Jacob Marley is explicitly remaining a ghost as a form of punishment for the sins he committed in life.
Doomed Scrooge, you're doomed for all time. Your future is a horror story written by your crime. Your chains are forged by what you say and do. So have your fun when life is done. A nightmare waits for you.
And this religious belief in the supernatural would go on to influence ghost hunting in an extremely profound way when it came to the people who were arguably responsible for shaping the practice as we currently see it, Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were extremely devoted Catholics themselves and involved their religion pretty heavily in their approach to paranormal investigations. Let's talk about them then, shall we? time. It's impossible to discuss ghost hunting in any real depth without at least a passing mention of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who, to be honest, probably serve as the original ghost hunters, at least a modern version of the practice. You may or may not have heard of them, but you will definitely be aware of their influence and, of course, the movies made about them. Those Conjuring movies, for example, are pretty much all based on investigations carried out by the Warrens. In certain communities, the Warrens were, and to an extent still are, though they are now both dead, so it's not like they're appearing at conventions or anything, considered kind of weird celebrities. You've definitely at least heard of Annabelle the doll, which, unlike the movie, actually looks kind of adorable and not at all scary, and the Amityville house hauntings, which are both their investigations. The Amityville case has literally 14 movies made about it, including one released later this year called, and I shit you not, I promise I'm not making this up, Amityville in Space, made by the director of Noah's Shark, Jurassic Shark 2, Aquapocalypse, and Bigfoot vs. Zombies, among other masterpieces, primarily involving sharks for some reason. Oh, and fun fact, Annabelle the doll is currently held in a box made of wood soaked in holy water and consecrated by a priest, such as her malevolent evil power, apparently. She's a fucking doll. Anyway, Ed and Lorraine Warren were for some time a sort of private investigator for hire outfit, except that rather than seeking out and hunting down cheating spouses or missing people, they were instead tasked with seeking out evidence of the paranormal and, let's be honest here, making money hand over fist. But who were they? Well, Ed Warren claimed to be a self-taught demonologist, author and lecturer, whereas Lorraine professed to be a clairvoyant and light trance medium. Together, with their powers combined, they were able to utterly fail to provide any conclusive documentary evidence of the paranormal, but make bucket loads of money from gullible and potentially vulnerable people, either paying them directly to investigate their homes, and the Warrens reportedly carried out over 10,000 investigations over the years, or buying their books, attending lectures they were giving, and so on, or even visiting their museum. In 1952, the Warrens founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, or NESPA, the oldest ghost hunting group in New England and one of the oldest in the US. As mentioned, they authored many books about the paranormal and about their private investigations into various reports of paranormal activity. According to the Warrens themselves, the official website of the NESPA, Viviglam magazine, and several other sources, NESPA uses a variety of individuals, including medical doctors, researchers, police officers, nurses, college students, and members of the clergy in its investigations, which is a fancy way of saying, look, we're not crazy, we found people willing to throw away their professional reputation and integrity in exchange for money, in much the same way as the tobacco industry used to be able to find doctors to lie and claim that actually smoking is good for the lungs.
Let's take a Winston break. That's it! Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack. Winston's got that filter blend. Yeah, Fred. Filter blend makes the big taste difference, and only Winston has it up front where it counts. Here, ahead of the pure white filter. Winston packs rich tobaccos specially selected and specially processed for good flavor in filter smoking. Yeah, buddy, Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
And the anti-climate change scientist grift is sadly still a viable one, though thankfully less so than it used to be. According to a 1997 interview with the Connecticut Post, Steve Novella and Perry DeAngelis investigated the Warrens for the New England Skeptical Society, or NESS. They found the couple to be pleasant people, but their claims of demons and ghosts at best as tellers of meaningless ghost stories and at worst dangerous frauds. They took the $13 Warren Museum tour and looked at all the evidence the Warrens had for spirits and ghosts. They watched the videos and looked at the best evidence the Warrens had. Their conclusion was that it's all blarney. They found common errors with flash photography and nothing evil in the artifacts the Warrens had collected. They have a ton of fish stories about evidence that got away. They're not doing good enough scientific investigation. They have a predetermined conclusion which they adhere to literally and religiously, according to Novella. Lorraine Warren said that the problem with Novella and DeAngelis was that they don't base anything on a god. Novella responded, "It takes work to do solid critical thinking, to actually employ your intellectual faculties and come to a conclusion that actually reflects reality. That's what scientists do every day, and that's what skeptics advocate." They, the Warrens, claim to have scientific evidence which does indeed prove the existence of ghosts, which sounds like a testable claim into which we can sink our investigative teeth. What we found was a very nice couple, some genuinely sincere people, but absolutely no compelling evidence. Whilst it was made clear that neither DeAngelis nor Novella thought the Warrens would intentionally cause harm to anyone, they did caution version that claims like the Warrens serve to reinforce delusions and confuse the public about legitimate scientific methodology. However, this was called into question when it came to the time a demon was accused of murder, which is a whole thing, but in an extremely brief way. The trial of Arne Cheyenne Johnson, also known as the Devil Made Me Do It case, is the first, and to my knowledge only known, court case in United States history in which the defense sought to prove innocence based on the defendant's claim of demonic possession and denial of personal responsibility for the crime. Honestly, Governor, it wasn't me who stabbed him, it was the devil that made me do it. There's more to it than this, and it's claimed that the Warrens originally attempted to exorcise the demons from Johnson's child brother-in-law, but the demon instead leapt into Johnson, causing him to become evil or something. Several months later, Arne killed someone during a party. His defense lawyer argued in court that he was possessed, a claim that was supported by the Warrens, who recommended lenience if not a total innocent verdict, but the judge ruled that such a defense could never be proven and was therefore inadmissible in a court of law. Arne was subsequently convicted, though he served only 5 years of a 10 to 20 year sentence. This is one of the many reasons people really have misgivings about the Warrens and the ways in which their ideas can be dangerous under certain circumstances. These ideas, of course, being a supernatural kind of version of Catholicism. The Warrens were indeed very devout Catholics, and their religion very much influenced their work, as they would be extremely keen to blame things on demons, as we've just discussed, and Ed once claimed that those who lack faith are particularly susceptible to possession by demonic forces, which is nice. It gives you a nice excuse to just claim that anyone who disagrees with you is actually just being possessed by a demon. Am I making this video because a demon possessed me and made me do it? Possibly. They worked very closely with the Catholic Church and often brought in priests to perform religious rites and exorcisms. Anyway, basically what the Warrens would do is now pretty standard in what could possibly be referred to as the ghost hunting community, but they were the first and arguably the most successful, so they've cemented their place in ghost hunting history and set the stage for what was to come. But what was to come? Well,
we're back.
Where's my Timmy?
You please step back towards the phone, please. Oh, fuck.
First time we were here, we were a little scared, guys.
Did we do something that upset you?
Just a slightly less scared guy.
Oh, okay, shut it off.
I fucking hope I see a ghost.
so here we are, we've finally caught up to the modern day, or I guess the early noughties, same basic thing. Was a few decades between friends. Anyway, modern ghost hunting, at least on the surface, has very little, if anything, to do with any kind of spirituality or religion, though as mentioned, it owes its roots to both. If anything, it's seemingly quite secular in nature and is more of a hobby or fun pastime than anything else. The purpose nowadays is not to exorcise or appease any troublesome spirits, or indeed to perform or serve any even supposedly useful service, but in fact arguably the opposite. Indeed, it seems like modern ghost hunting exists primarily in order to provoke and communicate with the spirits once considered entities best removed from a home and adversarial to humanity. This makes perfect sense and of course happened alongside the rise in secularism in wider society. Now, the people who believe in ghosts are in the minority, and the practice of ghost hunting, whilst it retains much of the trappings of earlier versions of the practice, the heavy use of the symbols on religiosity, spiritualism, psychics and so on, by and large now focuses almost entirely on defensively attempting to prove the existence of ghosts, collecting evidence under the guise of scientific endeavour and, let's be honest here, entertainment. There's a reason so many TV shows have been made following ghost hunters after all. The purpose of a ghost hunt is no longer akin to an exterminator or even a psychic, though psychics are definitely a tool still used today, but much like a deranged forensic investigator searching a crime scene for clues, attempting to interrogate suspects and being unconcerned with actually catching or punishing anyone, at least in comparison to the drive to find the truth. However, it must be said that they are extremely biased in doing so, having a specific suspect or type of suspect in mind before starting the investigation, and I suspect plant at least some evidence. You never actually see a ghost hunter TV show where they don't come away with any evidence at all, right? Although there may be a different reason for that, as we'll later discuss. So it makes sense that rather than being a priest, psychic or exterminator, most ghost hunters nowadays seem to think of themselves as ghost cops, or I guess as a kind of psychic detective. Oh hey, those are actually two real shows, how about that? Probably my favourite part of modern ghost hunting has to be the so-called evidence they come out with and try to pass off as legit. This is the part at the end of most ghost hunting shows where they combine all the information and various channels of input they collected throughout the episode and dump it all on the audience in an attempt to provide a convincing collection of evidence to demonstrate the existence of ghosts. In my opinion, they're mostly bullshit, but it's not quite that simple. A lot of it is actually really sneaky and kind of interesting in the way they're deceptively designed and presented.
Piss off, ghost!
He's freaking gone.
One of the most common things cited as quote-unquote evidence of ghostly activity or paranormal bullshit is your pretty bog standard apparition, or being seen by people, occasionally being caught on camera. Now, this is surprisingly rare, probably one of the rarest kinds of evidence, due to the fact that apparently spirits need a certain amount of spiritual energy to show themselves in our world, because they live in a separate but parallel dimension to us. But to those who can see into their dimension, for example psychics and mediums, they appear all the time, which is convenient. In essence, the idea is that we live in two planes of existence sort of smushed on top of one another, and sometimes, if our two realities cross over in some way, or if there is enough spiritual energy, whatever the fuck that means, they can be visible to us in our world, but psychics can already see into their world regardless. These are your classic ghostly sightings and the like, of course. No messing about with abstract ideas like cold spots or grasping at straws. There's a spooky fella in front of you, he died at some point, ooh, scary, etc. And this is the sort of thing that, as I mentioned, is often referred to and cited as evidence, but rarely, if ever, actually gets recorded in any way that could be proven or definitively used to prove the existence of ghosts or whatever. If I was a cynical man, I might say that the reason for this is because ghosts aren't real, and real tangible evidence like this is difficult to fake, but much like cryptids or aliens, there's lots of people who claim to have seen them with their eyes, just presumably they didn't bother to get their phones out to document these things. Anyone can say they've seen something for money, fame, attention, notoriety, and so on, as arguably is also the case in the UFO community, and likewise the human brain can be very effectively tricked and manipulated into believing it saw something that it didn't out of the corner of the eye. As I said in the cryptids video I made a while back, the human mind is amazing at creating and seeing patterns, and especially seeing human figures and faces even when there aren't any, considering that most ghost hunts take place in the dead of night, in the dark, with powerful torches casting long, dark shadows. There is a huge potential for the human mind, which is already likely in overdrive due to the fear of being in a haunted house in the first place, to misinterpret things like shadows and indiscernible shapes in the dark as ghostly figures or something. This also explains why there aren't any, or at least not as many, cow ghosts or whatever. Our brains are wired to look out for signs of other humans specifically, which means that animal ghosts tend not to show up as often.
Look at this photograph.
The bread and butter of your standard ghost hunter is video and photo evidence, much of which they try to capture by using hidden cameras, infrared, night vision, thermal imaging, etc., and ultimately, like all ghost hunting evidence, ends up being basically useless and inconclusive due to a number of factors, including but not limited to low resolution, night vision and heat vision cameras, particularly being susceptible to faults and technical issues, as well as artifacts and anomalous things that may appear to be supernatural but are more likely a result of perfectly normal phenomena appearing weird under certain circumstances when interacting with this technology. A prime example of this, which we will cover again slightly later, is orbs. The most common theory as to what they might be is basically shit flying in front of the lens that would be perfectly clear on an ordinary camera, but on an infrared one, for example, the quality is often too low to accurately determine what it is. That's video evidence. Photo evidence, however, is a lot more interesting. It of course has a lot longer history, though its origins as an art form and paranormal evidence is rather amusing, to be honest. It has been argued that the whole ghost hunting evidence phenomenon was born out of a love of technological failure, a trend that continues to today. From the beginning then, in 1861, William H. Mumler, an engraver, was studying the at the time new invention of photography when the shadowy figure of a young girl appeared on a plate he was developing. As Christa Cloutier describes in The Perfect Medium, Photography and the Occult, Mumler knew it to be an error, a consequence of accidentally reusing a plate that hadn't been sufficiently scrubbed of its previous exposure. Basically, he forgot to clean his equipment, and a figure from a previous picture appeared in the current one. As a prank, he showed the curious image to a spiritualist friend of his, not at the time being inclined much to the spiritual belief myself, and being of a jovial disposition, always ready for a joke. He later admitted, "I concluded to have a little fun, as I thought, at his expense." He told the spiritualist that the image was authentic and that no one else had been around when he'd taken the photograph. The friend took the joke seriously, and soon enough spiritualist publications had reprinted Mumler's mistake as proof of life after death. Mumler himself, realizing the potential to swindle gullible people out of money, soon changed his tune, claiming he'd discovered a wonderful phenomenon that really needed investigation, and began offering to make spirit photographs in earnest. For $10, normal sittings cost significantly less at the time, he'd take your photo, with the proviso he couldn't guarantee a ghost materialization, and on purpose repeat the same trick he'd previously done by accident, and thus a genre of ghost media was born. Mumler's inadvertent invention of spirit photography and subsequent business ventures cemented a connection between ghosts and technology that endures to this day, and specifically the ways that mistakes and accidents of technology appear as, and are held up as proof of, manifestations of the paranormal. Sorry, but ghost photography and video footage has been primarily just openly hoaxes from the very beginning.
I hear three different things. I hear what sounds to be kind of like I don't know, like a gasp or something along those lines, like some sort of an expressive breath. And then I hear a woman say, "Don't say anything," and it's like a whisper. She says, like, "Don't say anything." And as she's saying that, an orb falls from the ceiling. Can you tell me your name?
An EVP is an electronic voice phenomenon, aka basically just a disembodied voice. Essentially, ghost hunters carry around microphones throughout the hunt which are designed to capture ambient sounds, which can then later be poured over and scoured in search of messages from spirits. The basic premise being, of course, that audio recording devices can register otherwise inaudible communications from ghosts and spirits due to either having a higher range, not being able to be distracted, or simply that the spirit did not have the power or ability to speak loudly enough for a human to hear. Part of the attraction of the audio recorder for paranormal researchers then is an apparent objectivity. How could a skeptic refute the authenticity of a spirit captured by an unbiased technical instrument? It's not like someone just went around pretending to have heard things. To the believers, EVPs seem like incontrovertible evidence of communications from beyond the grave, but recent research has suggested that people don't agree much about what, if anything, they hear in the EVP sounds, a result readily explained by the fallibility of human perception. So what are EVPs, really? Well, obviously the chain of evidence for most EVPs makes hoaxes difficult to rule out, but let's just assume that many of these sounds are not deliberate fraud, because much as we may like to mock them, some ghost hunters do genuinely believe the things they say. It's undeniable that in some instances alleged EVPs are the voices of the investigators or interference from radio transmissions, and most of the time this isn't necessarily deliberate deception, just incompetent or shoddy data collection practices, which, let's be honest, is to be expected. These people are amateurs after all, and even professionals make mistakes. They are human. But some cannot be described in this way. What about them then? Well, this is when we have to ask what counts as a voice, or essentially what makes anyone so sure that what they heard was a voice or a word at all. You've probably seen how this works, to be honest. At the end of the show, all the team listen for EVPs and discuss amongst themselves what it is they found without trying to find an unbiased outside source. The problem, of course, is that these people are paranormal enthusiasts and as such will interpret basically anything as being proof of ghosts. Because the whole point of their hobby is to find proof of ghosts, so they're already extremely biased and more likely to interpret basically anything as proof of a ghost. It's not exactly scientific when you start from the perspective that anything unexplainable is a ghost, and then as proof you cite your other friends who believe in ghosts, usually after telling them what you reckon it sounds like, is it?
This spirit voice was captured only moments ago during complete silence.
Is there any family members here?
Are you a family member? If so, it is very nice to meet you. Can you please tell me your name?
We had a camera in the room where you saw the woman on the bed, and we captured a voice right in this area. It says just one word.
This is Mustafa and Brandon. We are at the top of the staircase.
It's a woman's voice. I hear a woman's voice. Now? Ma? Me personally, I feel like she's saying mom.
As research in mainstream psychology has shown us time and time again, people will readily perceive words in strings of nonsensical speech sounds, and likewise people's expectations about what they're supposed to hear can result in the illusory perception of tones, nature sounds, machine sounds, and, crucially, even voices, when only acoustic white noise, like the sound of a detuned radio, exists. More on radio tuning later when we come to talk about the spirit box, because, oh boy. Interpretations of speech in noise, a situation similar to EVP where the alleged voice is difficult to discern, can shift entirely based upon what the listener expects to hear. And if you expect to hear a spooky ghost, well, that's more than likely what you'll hear if you're actively looking for it. If you were to hear the same shit without prompting, helped along on TV with subtitles that literally tell you what to hear, it's not really all that surprising that EVPs appear so frequently. As Michael Nees, assistant professor of psychology for Lafayette College, put it, and I apologise for the long quote, but it is actually important. In my lab, we recently conducted an experiment to examine how expectations might influence the perception of purported EVP. Our EVP were audio recordings from a ghost hunting reality show. We asked 3 questions. Do people perceive the alleged EVP to be voices under controlled conditions? If they hear voices, do they agree about what the voices are saying without being told what they're supposed to hear? And finally, does it matter whether or not they think the research topic is paranormal? Half of participants were told that the experiment was part of a research project on paranormal EVP. The other half were told that we were studying speech perception in noisy environments, a typical, if perhaps boring, perceptual psychology experiment. In a study trial, participants heard a sound and were asked if they detected a voice in the stimulus. If they responded no, the trial ended. If they responded yes, they reported what they thought the voice had said. Across the study, participants heard the purported EVP recordings of actual human speech, recordings of human speech obscured in noise, and recordings of only noise. The EVP and speech in noise sounds were inherently ambiguous. They sort of sounded like a voice was present and sort of did not. Compared to the control condition, the suggestion of a paranormal research topic made people more likely to report hearing voices for both EVP, 48% versus 34% yes responses, and the voices hidden in the noise, 58% versus 40% yes responses. For real human speech, all participants nearly always heard a voice, 99% yes responses, and for noise, all participants almost never heard a voice, 1% yes responses. So, suggesting a paranormal research topic mattered only when the audio was ambiguous. Further, when people said they heard a voice in the EVP, only 13% agreed about what exactly the voice said. To compare, 95% of people on average agreed about what the voice said when they heard actual speech. In one final analysis, we showed that the participants' interpretations agreed with the paranormal researchers' interpretations less than 1% of the time. These findings suggest that paranormal researchers should not use their own subjective judgments to confirm the contents of EVP. But perhaps most importantly, we showed that the mere suggestion of a paranormal research context made people more likely to hear voices in ambiguous stimuli, although they couldn't agree on what the voices were saying. We concluded that EVP are an auditory example of pareidolia, the tendency to perceive human characteristics in meaningless perceptual patterns. There are many visual examples of pareidolia, things like seeing human faces in everyday objects, such as Jesus and a piece of toast. Research from cognitive psychology has shown that paranormal believers may be especially prone to misperceiving chance events. A face-like configuration in a slice of toast seems meaningful. People ask, what are the chances? But if you add up all the slices of toast you see over the days and weeks and months of a lifetime, it becomes inevitable that you will encounter some of these human-like configurations in toast due to chance. Similarly, paranormal investigators record a practically limitless amount of audio and use all manner of sound processing techniques, including filtering the sounds to remove particular frequencies and boosting the volume. Inevitably, they're able to find samples of audio that sound somewhat like a voice. Assuming some of these voice-like sounds can't be attributed to shoddy data collection practices, their actual sources likely run the spectrum from ambient environmental noises to electrical interference to audio processing artifacts. If the listener is intently expecting to hear a person, virtually any sound can meet that expectation. One writer aptly suggested that EVP are like an auditory ink blot test, a blank slate upon which the listener can project any interpretation. The tendency for EVP investigators to hear a voice, a meaningful sound sound with agency and intention is likely amplified by the suggestion of a paranormal context. Here's the trick. They turn the gain right up, which does technically increase the range of things that can be heard, but also fills the silence with white noise. And it's this white noise that most of the audible evidence comes out of. It's the audio equivalent of interpreting clouds or static, basically. And then they put big subtitles on screen showing what they want you to hear, so you're basically forced to agree with their interpretation.
You're as cold as ice, willing to sacrifice. Are you crazy?
Cold spots have been a part of what I suppose could charitably be called ghost lore for basically forever. As a result, of course, the ghost hunters have done everything in their power to try, and usually fail, to rationalize it by suggesting that actually ghosts need energy, and that one method of doing this is by drawing heat from the surrounding areas, or possibly that ghosts, being from the afterlife, are just naturally cold, and when you are in their presence, it just gets cold for you as well. Kind of like when you sleep in the same bed as someone who runs naturally hot, and as a result you feel incredibly hot all night too, but obviously cold, not hot. There are a number of very obvious rational explanations for cold spots, of course, and in fact I'll just name a couple of them here to stop wasting your time. One, a lot of ghost hunts take place in old abandoned buildings with no central heating and often are open to the elements, or at the very least are not sufficiently protected from them. As a result, there may very well be spots in any given house or room that are naturally colder than others, because these places generally don't have amazing insulation. 2, people who are scared and have emotions running high, like for example someone who believes in ghosts walking through a supposedly haunted building, may experience natural fluctuations in body temperature and perception of environmental temperature in general due to adrenaline and all the chemicals that absolutely flood the brain when we enter a state of panic or fear. There's a reason why when people go into shock or experience something traumatic, emergency services often provide them with blankets. 3, much like with the sounds that so often get attributed to ghosts, it's possible that the minds of the ghost hunters, often in a heightened state of stress, might start to play tricks on them. 4, of course, I don't mean to make any accusations, but it must be acknowledged that cold spots cannot be recorded or proven unless you happen to have a temperature reader with you, which in fairness is sometimes the case, but more often is not, and usually doesn't actually prove what they think it does. So if you're running low on evidence and you need to have something to show for your investigation, well, nobody's actually going to be able to check if you claim to have found a cold spot, are they? This also goes for things like feeling like you're being touched, as well as odd smells, a feeling of unease and similar shit. Of course, all of which are often cited as evidence of a supernatural encounter from time to time. So, I mean, that's pretty much that for cold spots, right?
Receive this orb.
Honestly, this one barely counts, and is relied upon by ghost hunters far too much. What is often considered an orb, or ghostly apparition, or physical manifestation is, frankly, laughable. For one thing, they're never actually seen by the ghost hunters themselves, but are recorded by the cameras, sort of reverse vampire rules, I guess, which basically means that they're almost certainly just digital artifacts, or else other less supernatural phenomena like dust or insects flying in front of the camera, which would explain the way that orbs are often characterized as moving intelligently or with purpose, as if there's a thinking creature directing it, which, well, yeah, that's what insects are. The theory, of course, is pretty simple. The ghost is there and wants to manifest, but doesn't have enough spiritual energy to fully manifest in corporeal human form, so instead it appears as an orb to let the humans know that it's there, but it is otherwise unable to make contact due to being out of ghost fuel or something. But give it the ghost equivalent of a can of Monster Energy and it might be able to. Another thing ghosts are supposedly able to do is manipulate electrical objects and contraptions, usually by, for example, turning lights on and off, pranking people by messing with their TVs and such, and so on. This one, as I mentioned at the beginning, is actually quite a sensitive one for me because, as I mentioned, my grandmother, who was incredibly important to me, actually believed in it to an extent. She used to have a standing lamp in her living room, which she genuinely believed her sadly deceased son kept turning on overnight, and I have to say, I never fully believed it, but it's definitely not not emotionally easy for me to say that this one is full of shit necessarily. Anyway, here's why it's full of shit. As it turns out, there are plenty of non-supernatural explanations for stuff like this. The most obvious examples being things designed to be predisposed to this outcome, such as motion detector lights, lights on a timer, and smart bulbs. Party and or Christmas light displays can be programmed to switch lights on and off by themselves, and often things like universal remotes, TV remotes, etc. can interfere with the wrong piece of equipment. Or to put it another way, if you and your neighbour have the same kind of TV, your neighbour could be switching your TV on and off by accident when trying to switch theirs on or off, and that's without taking into account that nowadays smart TVs and often even smart light bulbs can be hacked and or accessed through other means. Even things like touch sensors can be affected by, for example, a fly landing on the switch. Ruling out deliberate human intervention though, there's also mechanical malfunction. For example, a mechanical light switch breaks in such a way that electrical contact is made, thus switching the light on, or induction, in which a strong magnetic field, such as that produced by certain household objects, can induce a current in a bulb, in essence turning it on. And as anyone who's had a smart bulb break or become disconnected from the Wi-Fi knows, it flashes and is incredibly annoying sometimes. Bottom line is that there are lots of ways that a light or other electronic device could switch off or on unexpectedly that don't necessarily require a ghost. Regardless, as with all this kind of stuff, the burden of proof is with the person making the claim, not the skeptics. As it turns out, my old Xbox 360 randomly turning itself off halfway through play doesn't necessarily mean that my house is haunted by the ghost of a late 2000s gamer, though of course I can't prove that. I probably just have dodgy electrics, or I should probably just upgrade my gaming system. So, you know, that's a relief, kinda.
Greetings everybody, this is Ken, and this is my ghost hunting rig. Yeah,
Alright, so now we've gone over the evidence collected, but how is it collected? As it turns out, ghost hunting is actually quite an expensive hobby, or it can be, due to the massive amount of insane and completely baffling gadgets and tools of the trade that many claim must be purchased, but it's important to do so as a ghost hunter if you want to be taken seriously, because it gives the absolute nonsense evidence they provide a sense of legitimacy, as well as collecting more and more bullshit data to be used as evidence. It seems much more scientific to say, we discovered a number of EVPs, the EMF levels were off the scale, and we were able to get a number of responses from both the Spirit Box and Ovilus, as well as the laser grid being set off on one occasion, than it might be to say, I'm a psychic and I spoke to the ghosts and I definitely saw a ghost I promised, but I didn't get a photo of it because ghosts are immune to cameras. Let's talk about some of this absolutely wild stuff, shall we?
Andy, was it you that shut the door on my face? Dave, last night Lainey said that there were 2 taps on the bed and she said it felt like the cat was climbing on the bed, but when she looked, the cat wasn't there. Was that you tapping on the bed? Dowsing rods, otherwise known as divining rods, are a fun bit of equipment because they're simple but effective. You can get some on Amazon for less than £20, which in comparison to some of the other equipment later on this list is actually surprisingly cheap. Anyway, at the most basic, divining rods are these poles contained within a handle, allowing them to move freely. Indeed, the core concept of dowsing rods is that they pivot within the handle very easily, so in theory could be moved by spirits who may have only a minor ability to interact with the physical world and are therefore used to communicate with them. So, for example, you could ask, is there anyone with us now, or are you a friendly spirit, or something, and the spirit in question could use its powers to cross the 2 rods as a form of answering yes. Dowsing rods are also derived from a party trick and superstition regarding finding running water, the theory being that the bodies of water affect them in the same way as ghosts do. Basically, it's what these people who spend their spare time wandering around fields with a metal detector did 500 years ago before the invention of the metal detector.
So when you get a signal, when you get a signal, when you get a signal, it goes wheep, 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 wheep. And if it's on, it goes the detector.
They'd spend their spare time wandering around fields with either a pendulum, a dowsing twig, or, of course, a pair of dowsing rods. But probably the easiest and most accurate comparison is to Ouija boards, which, much like divining rods, is a parlor game you can buy at just about any toy store and works primarily because of human bodies being imperfect and or other people being deceitful. See, as anyone who's ever used a Ouija board knows, most of the time it's either nonsense gibberish caused by the natural movement of human fingers, we're not capable of being 100% still of course, or it's it's someone deliberately fucking with the other participants. More on this in a moment. Likewise, with divining rods, it's extremely easy for the person holding them to either accidentally give themselves a false positive response due to the natural minute movements of their hands which they cannot control, or of course to deliberately make those small movements to move the rods, a movement so slight that it's probably either imperceptible to most people or else easily passed off as a natural movement. You can see this because if you attach the rods to a stationary object, or if you don't touch the Ouija board but ask the same questions, surprisingly the spirits seem a lot less interested, even though in theory it should take them the exact same amount of effort to move them regardless of who is holding them. In fact, you know what? This shit is only like 15 quid. Fuck it, let's do a practical demonstration. Alright, so I have these now. I made sure to buy the exact same models as this guy who is obsessed with the fact that his house is haunted by a poltergeist called Dave, so I could replicate what could charitably be described as an experiment he carried out on his YouTube channel.
I just want to say, I want to talk to Dave and Andy. Those are the only people that I would like to speak to. I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm actually a little bit nervous to use these because I'm on my own. Lainey's feeling a little bit poorly sick. So she's like downstairs at the minute, but she's left me to do this one on my own and I'm a little bit nervous. Right, compose yourself. Dave, are you here? Cross the rods for yes, open them for no. Nope, no, that's not okay. No. Oh God, no. Why have I agreed to do this myself? Why have I agreed this? I've brought myself back together. I've got the rods back. Let's keep asking some questions. Like, let's keep the ball rolling with this, because although I'm a little bit freaked out by this and I am on my own and that's kind of freaking me out a little bit as well, there are some things that we want answered, so it's a pretty good medium to find out. So it's okay, I've got everyone with me. Imagine there is a lot of people behind the camera. It's okay, and we move. So if Dave is here, can you please cross the dowsing rods? Okay, cool. Right, I'm gonna try and... No, I'm not gonna influence it. If Andy is here, can you please open the dowsing rods? I don't know if you need to give it time to answer. Oh. Okay. Trying to hold it as steady as I can.
To demonstrate how this works. First off, unlike more practiced ghost hunters, this guy makes the pretty amateurish mistake of being too obvious with his manipulation of the rods, which I will try not to. And let's have a seance in my apartment, which is definitely not haunted unless you can call the smell of my neighbour's spliffs ghostly activity. I don't know, I'm sure ghosts like to blaze it too. This is the only one of these that I'll be doing a practical demonstration of, by the way, because these set me back £13, whereas the more advanced equipment can cost hundreds for obvious reasons. What I'm holding is a pretty simple copper rod in a copper tube, whereas most ghost hunting equipment is a lot more mechanical and complex, as you've probably seen if you've watched literally any ghost hunting show. This is your EVP recorders, your motion sensors and so on. You can buy all sorts of crap for this purpose, including a teddy bear containing a motion activated camera for 500 quid if you really want to throw money down the fucking toilet. Anyway, that aside, let's try to contact the spirit, shall we? So, hello. I think we're recording audio, so here we are. I've got my divining rods here for you. Oh shit. I'm not used to being on camera. And I'm about to test whether or not my flat, which being honest, is in kind of a dodgy area of my town. So there's a possibility someone's been murdered here. It's unlikely, I'm going to be honest. But we'll see, I guess. So here are my divining rods, as I probably showed in the video that I played from the other guy who was doing it with these. Oh shit, with these. The way it works is if the rods cross or uncross, it can mean something. It doesn't necessarily have to. They can move on their own like this, you see. And I'm currently holding them in place. But once I let go, they'll probably just start moving because that's just how it works. Yeah, so let's give this a go, shall we? So. Is anyone here? Well, no, it appears not. Oh, shit. Okay, maybe that was me. I mean, it was me because ghosts aren't real. But, I want to speak to a ghost. If you're a ghost, can you cross the road? Oh. That was a very definite answer there. This is such bullshit. Is your name Dave? Oh shit. Is your name Rachel? That's a half move, so I'm not sure what that means. Maybe there's two ghosts? I should have prepared better for this. I don't really know what to ask a ghost. Are you visiting for a reason? Oh. Is that reason? Oh. We've already got a no. Okay, sorry. It's hard to stop these moving, which I'm beginning to see is... This is, I mean, it's a kind of pointless experiment anyway, but this is definitely... There's a problem if you're trying to prove the existence of ghosts using these things. For fuck's sake. Stop moving, you can't. Are you here to punish me for my evil ways? We've got a slight movement. Okay, they touched. I don't know what that means. It's not the same as being crossed. So what I'm discovering in this little experiment is because of my dyspraxia, which is a learning difficulty that also affects motor functions and makes it especially hard for me, as well as, you know, on top of the natural human inability to remain completely still. It makes it very difficult for me, which means that I can't really effectively do this experiment as you might hope, or I can't do a control, because whatever I do, the rods move, which happens to everyone, but especially for me, I think the effect is rather exaggerated. So, on to the next experiment, I guess. Hello! For this next experiment, what I've done is I've sort of wedged the divining rods into my bookcase. Please don't judge me. I haven't put my type ratchets in order yet. I've not moved in long. Please don't hate me. Up there is a photo of myself and my partner. I'll probably blur that out because I don't think I want people to know what she looks like. Also, these are not my Harry Potter books. I protested against them being here. I don't like Harry Potter. I don't like J.K. Rowling. And also, obviously, they were bought like literally decades ago, so it's not like any money went towards the Queen Turf. Anyway, these are the divining rods. I'm now going to ask similar questions because I can't remember what questions I asked the first time. I hope this is recording audio, and I really hope the last time it recorded audio, and we'll see what happens. So, ghosts. Is there anyone visiting from another realm? No. Ghosts. Fuck you. No, no reaction. See, okay, this is quite an effective experiment, I guess, because as you can see, fuck all is happening back there. Ghosts, show yourself. Demonstrate your power. Comment about my shirt. No, fuck all. Fuck all is happening. Experiment concluded, I guess. Myth busted, I guess, but with less sex crimes, allegedly?
It's necessary to have at least another person. I mean, I prefer just one other person. And as I use it, I politely ask if anybody's there to make sure we have some sort of entity with us.
To fully discuss the origin of the Ouija board, we first need to talk about talking boards, the generic precursor to the Ouija board in the late 1800s. These things were mostly similar to the boards we recognise today, having letters, numbers, and a small cursor to point towards supposed messages. Today, Ouija board, talking board, and spirit board are all interchangeable terms to describe the same tool, though technically Ouija is the official brand name of a commercial product. See, whilst talking boards were pretty widespread during the spiritualist craze of the 1800s, the Ouija board begins with Charles Kennard, a human man who didn't care about the spiritualism movement, but did see it as a potential business opportunity, and as such, decided to just start producing talking boards on an industrial scale. The name Ouija doesn't mean anything specific, and there's actually a lot of speculation as to the origin of the name. Kennard claimed that the board named itself after he asked it, which is just obviously marketing and pure bullshit, but according to him, the board said that Ouija is an ancient Egyptian phrase which means good luck. This sounds pretty interesting, but again, it has to be acknowledged that just like spiritualism, Egyptology was also a common fascination in the 1800s, around the same time the Ouija board was invented, often by the same people who were into spiritualism, up to and including certain weird rich people literally snorting pulverized and powdered Egyptian mummy dust like coke for its supposed health benefit. Interestingly, the change in attitudes towards the Ouija board stems at least in part from the movie The Exorcist 1973, along with the satanic panic of the 80s. Suddenly, rather than being a parlor game and or ghost hunting tool, the Ouija board became an evil and demonic artifact in the minds of many of the public. It still survived, however, and the rights were published by Hasbro, which still sells Ouija boards and owns the trademark for the name, along with My Little Pony and Transformers, because it is a children's toy and board game, though try telling some people that and they'd get rather upset. The general attitude among modern believers in the supernatural power of the Ouija board is that a person who uses one should be cautious, respectful, and reverential, lest they invite evil upon themselves. Some believe it can be a source of connection and enlightenment, but can perhaps become dangerous with the wrong intention. Others actually do unironically use it to connect with their ancestors or find answers from the other side. So what actually does a Ouija board do? How does it work? Assuming it's not ghosts, obviously. It's our old friend the idea motor effect, which suggests that our movements can be driven by our thoughts, and that there are movements people make that they're unaware of, referred to as a subconscious movement. So when using a Ouija board, for example, a person may subconsciously move the cursor, spelling out things only they could know, thus quote-unquote proving the existence of a ghost. The other players may also contribute their own subconscious movement, which can explain why the planchette appears to move independently. This effect may explain why a variety of other paranormal phenomena work as well. Or alternatively, it could be the natural human inability to remain completely still, just like the divining rods, and of course, as just mentioned, it's also completely possible for one of the players to deliberately move the central piece in order to fuck with the other players. Once again, I find it necessary to remind you that this is a children's toy sold by the My Little Pony people. You may as well play fucking Scrabble with ghosts for all the good it'll do. This is an interesting one, actually. Most ghost hunters will point a camera at an area of high activity and also set up some kind of movement detecting apparatus in the same area, with the logic of course being that because ghosts are often unable to be seen, but many stories people tell about their ghost encounters do involve some kind of physical interaction like touching or pulling at clothes and what have you by an unseen force, it is feasible that some ghosts may be invisible but exert some kind of physical presence. In other words, they're unable to be picked up by standard visual equipment like night vision cameras, but may be able to be picked up by a motion detector. Motion detectors come in all kinds of forms, from your standard household ones that you might have in your home, as they are used in burglar alarms obviously, to full-on high-end specialist equipment like laser grids, REM pods, some proper spy level shit. The plan of course being that they will pick up movement rather than trying to see an invisible entity. I don't know why they think it works, because if I was a ghost and I see shit like this, I'm walking, or floating I guess, in the complete opposite direction. I'm no Tom Cruise, I'm not doing the laser shit. Of course, the problem with motion detectors is that they're far from infallible, as anyone who's woken up to their burglar alarm going off at 3 AM due to something flying in front of the movement detector or an electrical fault setting the system off can attest. Likewise, the places mostly targeted by ghost hunters are run-down, ancient and abandoned buildings, at least partially open to the elements and called home by a good amount of wildlife, including flying creatures like insects, birds and bats, which could easily set movement detectors off, and in the case of insects could be too small to be picked up by cameras, or if they are, misinterpreted as orbs.
Is there anybody there? Anybody like to talk to us? What's your name? Where are you from?
The spirit box is probably one of the most baffling pieces of ghost hunting equipment out there, and that's honestly saying something. Basically what it is a modified radio designed to cycle through radio stations at such a rapid rate as to be unable to pick up specific words or phrases, with the logic being that every word you do hear or interpret it as saying must therefore be a deliberate attempt to communicate by a paranormal entity. Kind of like the gas mask zombies in Doctor Who using radio grids to communicate. Now of course this is very much like most ghost hunting evidence in that it deliberately creates static and random input in order to provide opportunities to mislead and reduce the subjective interpretation. Basically, the way it works is like this. Sometimes, if you listen long enough, some of the random syllables it spits out will happen to occur close enough together to be able to kinda but not really interpret as a word or phrase, which can then be assumed to be a message from beyond the veil, or whatever. The Ovilus, which we'll go on to talk about shortly, also has a similar setting to this, where it skips the radio part altogether and just makes random creepy noises that can be strung together into words if you want them to, on top of its primary function, which we'll get to that. Of course, this does raise the, in my opinion, rather pertinent question of how it was decided or discovered that ghosts and other beasties are able to communicate in this way, using pre-existing radio voices and things like that to convey a message, like Bumblebee in Transformers or some shit.
Bumblebee, stop lubricating the man.
Get that thing to stop!
What is it about this specific technology that lends itself to a spiritual manipulation? How would ghosts even know or work out that they could do this? And importantly, in my opinion, why aren't they clearer? Much like EVPs, most evidence picked up with the spirit box ends up being nothing more than a couple of words at most, usually just a single word, and often just a noise that's open to interpretation. But honestly, crap evidence that relies almost entirely on interpretation and confirmation bias is par for the course at this point, right?
Dude, again, look. Holy shit, dude, look, come here, come here.
Is he going ham?
Look. Whoa.
You've definitely seen this one before. It's basically used as a ghost detector in some cases, and on some TV shows basically what it does is detect low levels of electromagnetism, hence the EMF name. It stands for electromagnetic field, and according to some people it can be used to find ghosts because, well, ghosts are magnetic, I guess. That sounds about right. However, shockingly, it turns out that this may not be as effective as it may seem. As Colin Dickey, writing for The Atlantic, put it, the small Syracuse, New York-based company K2 Enterprises makes a number of handheld electronic devices, including the Dog Dazer, a supposedly safe, humane device that deters aggressive dogs with a high-pitched radio signal, but it is best known for the Safe Range EMF. The size of a television remote, the Safe Range EMF detects electromagnetic fields, or EMF, measuring them with a bright LED array that moves from green to red depending on their strength. Designed to locate potentially harmful EMF radiation from nearby power lines or household appliances, the Safe Range has become popular for another use, detecting from ghosts. Since its appearance in the show Ghost Hunters, where the ghost hunter Grant Wilson claimed that it had been specifically calibrated for paranormal investigators, the safe range, usually referred to as a K2 meter, has become ubiquitous among those looking for spirits. Search for it on Amazon, and many listings will refer to it as a ghost meter, an indispensable tool in the ghost hunter's arsenal. It isn't alone among EMF meters. Of the best-selling EMF meters on Amazon, 2 out of the top 3 are explicitly marketed as ghost meters. Scanning the various product descriptions and reviews though, what becomes clear is that the K2 safe range is a relatively unreliable electromagnetic field meter. It operates on only one axis, you have to wave it around to get a proper reading, and it's unshielded, meaning that it can be set off by a cell phone, a two-way radio, or virtually any kind of electronic device that occasionally gives off electromagnetic waves. The reviewer Kenny Biddle found he could set it off with, among other things, a computer mouse and a camera battery pack. Yet it's precisely because it's not particularly good at its primary purpose that makes it a popular device for ghost hunters. Erratic, prone to false positives, easily manipulated, its flashy LED display will light up any darkened room of a haunted house or castle, which is to say, its popularity as a ghost hunting tool stems mainly from its fallibility. And honestly, I don't know if I could have worded it any better. These things can be set off by just about any electronic device, including their other ghost hunting equipment or camera equipment, meaning that it's basically cyclical. At least some of the so-called evidence is basically just a few of the ghost hunters' own pieces of equipment interacting with one another.
Today, we're talking about infrared thermometers.
This is a digital infrared thermometer. As you can see, it's a handheld device which can be used to measure the surface temperature of an object or area without having to touch it. The way it works is due to its built-in laser, which enables it to acquire the surface temperature of a particular object with no contact with that object. Some versions take an average of all the space between the object and the sensor, which is why if you point them at the sky they don't work properly, and come back with ridiculously cold readings, though not all are like this. Since they're designed to be non-contact, infrared thermometers are mainly used in industrial applications that require performing quick spot readings of temperatures from a distance when the object's temperature is too high to approach, the targeted object is unavailable to reach, or when a traditional probe-style thermometer is unable to be directly embedded into the target being checked. In addition to being designed for industrial use, infrared thermometers are also used for the measurement of the body temperatures of human beings. With the help of the non-contact feature, they're prone to preventing risk of contagion when being used to measure the body temperatures. They were actually employed a lot during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, for example. However, it cannot be ignored that this means that they cannot really be used as a method of detecting cold spots or other ghostly phenomena. The primary reason for this, as it turns out, is that whilst it probably can tell you when certain spots are a little cold or even colder than the surrounding area, it can't tell you what that means or really pinpoint specific points that one can prove to be measurably colder. More of a kind of vague idea of temperature variance, and even then half the time it's inaccurate. And also, of course, it kind of has to be said that, well, what would it even mean if it could detect the things it's claimed to be able to do? Would that be proof of ghosts, or would it be proof that sometimes rooms are not a uniform, consistent temperature throughout?
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is the Ovilus 3. I love this piece of equipment, despite the fact that it has garnered a huge amount of controversy from paranormal investigators the world over the last several years, because some people feel that the results that it captures are not fully credible.
I saved the best till last. As you may have become increasingly aware, some of the equipment you can buy to assist in your ghost hunting efforts is absolutely unhinged and in some cases obviously just a scam. Probably the apex of this trend, however, is a little thing called an Ovilus, which from looking into it online will set you back around $500 on average. In the most basic possible terms, the Ovilus takes environmental readings that other, more specialized equipment exists specifically to measure, like temperature, radiation, EMF, energy, etc., and automatically generates a word based on this input from an inbuilt dictionary, with the theory being that the ghost can manipulate the environment around it in order to produce a reading from the Ovilus. The problem, of course, is that much like the spirit box, there's not really a way to communicate to the ghost's instructions on how to do so. For example, let's for the moment assume that, yes, Ghosts can manipulate all these things in order to get a response. How exactly does it know exactly how to produce certain words? Presumably the Ovilus will produce a specific word at a specific temperature and level of EMF radiation. Let's say the word is murder to be extra spooky. How is the ghost supposed to know the exact levels to change the environment to in order to produce the word murder? What if it fucks up and accidentally produces a different word like sausage? Presumably not even the ghost hunters know the exact levels that produce certain words, but even if they did, how would they communicate that without basically just telling the ghost what to say? And even then, there's some pretty large assumptions being made, like that ghosts can even manipulate things like temperature and EMF radiation, and that these things varying or fluctuating is anything to do with ghosts at all. So essentially, it's basically just a random word generator that costs $500 and has a bunch of other bells and whistles attached, which is a nice children's toy, but for $500 you could get a lot of much nicer ones, including the teddy bear with the camera thing mentioned earlier. In short, the Ovilus is ghost hunting on easy mode, and in my opinion, it's pretty much just cheating. I mean, stuff like hypersensitive audio equipment and night vision cameras are by no means effective methods of gathering proof of ghosts, but equally, at least they don't just deliver false evidence on purpose. The Ovilus, in my opinion, is the final step on the road that began with the spirit box and EMF meter. Honestly, it's kind of genius, really. Ghost hunters of the past would have to individually measure spooky phenomena like magnetic field fluctuations, cold spots, and so on, and then extrapolate from this data to suggest that perhaps this was a spooky ghost trying to communicate, but the modern ghost hunter can simply carry around a machine that speaks ghost language to tell them exactly what the spooky ghosts are trying to say. It's all very convenient, and of course, rather takes the fun out of it. Where's the challenge at that point?
These are just ghosts that broke my heart before I met you.
So, what have we learned? Well, hopefully a little more about ghosts. That would be nice. We've talked a lot about why we believe in ghosts, what they are, and their history. I find this sort of stuff fascinating, and I hope you did too. One thing I hope I conveyed effectively is the history, weirdness, and deception of the hobby of ghost hunting. Their methods and the stuff they consider evidence is clearly absurd and designed to be misleading. And finally, I hope you'll be around to enjoy the third and final part of this project, in which me and a couple of friends of mine carry out our own little ghost hunt, featuring as many of the bullshit gadgets I can get access to when it comes out later this year. I'm sure it'll be fun to do, and I hope we prove either the point that it's a dumb, pointless endeavour to begin with, or who knows, maybe we'll actually find a ghost. But, importantly, hopefully, it'll be kind of fun and spooky. If you want to contribute to me being able to make this little project a reality, feel free to donate to me using the links contained within my link tree so I can afford to buy or hire as many of these stupid fucking gadgets as possible. I'll also add some of them to an Amazon wish list or something. Overall, ghost hunting doesn't prove the existence of ghosts. In fact, it arguably exists to do the opposite, and the hobby seems incredibly deceptive, deliberately designed to create false evidence. But if you do want to ghost hunt respectfully and responsibly, then fine. If you believe in ghosts and you don't start being weird about it, then fine. I have absolutely no problems with people who believe in ghosts in general, and like most things, as long as you're not a dickhead about it, you do you, you know? As I said in my video about cryptids, I don't necessarily believe, and I may think that you're potentially a bit weird if you do, but I'm not going to judge or think any less of you for doing so. I'm much more concerned with behaviours than beliefs in this regard. Stay spooky, friends, but don't become too credulous. Ghosts. Fuck you.